All right, so we are headed back to the tournament hall again. I was just parked at work charging my car while I had some in and out for lunch, which was pretty good. One thing that my opponent told me that I think I forgot to mention to you last time is that he was worried about having to play me because he saw that I was watching Daniel Naroditsky on YouTube before I was playing sometime yesterday. So that was interesting. Always funny, I look around and see people studying and watch them watching stuff. I saw somebody watching Levy Rosman's, recap of the candidates. And I had a similar reaction of, oh man, they're paying attention just like me. They must be pretty decent. And so funny that other people end up with a similar impression, actually. Anyways, looking forward to playing this last round. Should be pretty good. Don't know if I have white or black. Haven't seen the pairings up yet. Haven't really checked yet. But I should arrive with a little bit of time before the round starts, which should be good. And I'm hoping that I can get another good game in, go from 1 to 4. A draw or a win sort of moves me up percentage-wise, so we'll take it because we're below 500 right now. Yeah, and beyond that, not a whole lot to say. Still debating if I'm going to play Blitz tonight or not, so I guess you'll have to find out by whether or not there's another video or not. But, yeah, I think that's all I have for you guys. The Candidates Tournament, by the way, has been really fun. I've been enjoying watching. The Candidates Tournament is the thing that people play in order to be able to play against the world champion. So they have this tournament, and the winner of the tournament gets to play Magnus Carlsen, the current world champion. So it's an interesting cast of people. Fabio Caruana, who was the challenger to the world champion a couple of years ago, is one of the players that's in it. Jan Nepomniachtchi, who was a player in the most recent world championship, is in it. Hikaru Nakamura, one of the most popular streamers of chess, is in it, as is Alireza Firouzja, who is 19 years old and is the youngest person above 2,800, I believe. And also Ding Liren from China. He is in the candidates as well. And it's fascinating because he did not play top-level chess for a really long time because he was in Canada where everything is locked down. Sorry, not Canada. He was in China where everything is locked down. And he played 25 games in 30 days or something, which, given that these games are all like 5 hours long, is like, that's a lot of games. That's a lot of games to play in that period of time. So that's pretty exciting that he managed to be able to play, to be able to secure the last spot after Sergei Kiryakin was disqualified for some political commentary that he had related to the war in Ukraine. He's very pro-Russia, and I think that FIDE was not really appreciative of his sort of ahistorical view of things. Anyways, tangent about the candidates aside, we're going to try and get a good game in here for the last one. Don't know if I'm white or black. Don't know who I'm playing. Don't know how it's going to be. But I do know we're going to get one more good one in, and that's going to be it. All right, I'll talk to you guys after the round. Peace. Okay, so this is game 5. Again, I apologize for being late here. I had COVID, and I just went over the game, but it took me forever to explain what was going on. So hopefully I can be a little bit more succinct here. It also turns out during the game I was seeing a lot of ghosts, but you'll see. Now, one thing I do have to tell you, this game is... I don't know that I would call it good. What I would call it is entertaining. It was very entertaining. And it's not really going to be clear. It's going to seem like you know who's going to win. And I'm not sure that you're going to be accurate if you think you know. So we play e4. Our opponent plays e5. We get to play our King's Gambit. They take, and we play knight f3. Our opponent plays bishop c5, which is interesting. It turns out this is not a great move because we can just play d4 and kick our opponent's bishop back. Like, we get to take the center with free tempo. And then I regretted not putting my bishop on c4 later, but we played what turns out to be the computer move bishop takes f4. Turns out not having our bishop on this diagonal prevented prevented a bunch of tactics later. Our opponent plays queen e7. Now, in this position, we should just play either knight c3 or c3, or queen e2. There are several reasonable options here because, again, material is equal and we have a better development. But I played bishop d. I played bishop d3, and my opponent checks, and I get the knight out because I don't like. Okay, I was down a pawn at the beginning of the game, and I earned that pawn back. My opponent can certainly have a pawn if it means that I get to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces developed, and my opponent has 1, 2 pieces developed. I would take white in this circumstance, and the computer agrees pretty strongly. It says taking that pawn is not the move. I imagine it probably wanted something like this. Is that better? That is not better. That is even worse.
Trading off your only developed piece is probably not the strongest move. Nonetheless, my opponent plays queen takes b2. And we played knight d5 because there are several different things that we want. But chief among them is the fact that our knight was not defended, and we would like to not lose our knight for nothing. That, and in general, in this opening, the more pieces you can get around your opponent's king, the more likely you are to mate them. So my opponent plays d6, and we play castles. Our opponent plays knight c6, which threatens this pawn for the third different time. And we play king h1. It turns out that that's not the move that needs to be played here. The computer instead suggests, rook b1. And the reason it suggests rook b1 is you move your queen anywhere, takes, and we're forking the king and rook here. So we immediately get the rook that we just lost back, and we picked up a bishop. And then if there's some way that we can exfiltrate this knight, then we're up a piece. So the computer and all of our pieces developed, and our opponent's not going to be able to castle and all of that stuff. However, I never saw that, so I play king h1 because I know if this ever happens, I don't want it to happen with check because I'm not sure that I'm going to want to recapture, to be honest. I'm going to want to continue to push and develop and stuff. So my opponent plays knight ge7, sort of threatening this knight. We play rook e1, which turns out to be a mistake. Eventually, our opponent is going to develop their bishop here, which they do immediately. We play h3, which turns out to be the wrong move. We want this square available for our queen to be on the h-file later. Anyways, this induces our opponent's trade, but now normally you'd have a rook and a queen lined up with a battery here, but that's not the case here. Our opponent plays knight takes d4, and we don't care about that. We play queen g4 because we don't want our opponent to be able to castle queenside. If that's the case, it's going to be pretty hard to attack our opponent. We want our opponent to have to go this way if they're going to get safe. They play knight g6 because this is an undefended pawn, and they're a little bit concerned about what it would look like to castle. For example, if they castle, we can go like this, which apparently is not great for us, but it is a scary position. And another thing that threatens is we can go here. So that apparently is great for us for reasons that I'm not sure that I yet see, but I totally believe. Nonetheless, our opponent plays knight g6 because I want to stop this threat, and we play e5. e5 does a couple of things. It threatens to capture this knight. It threatens to capture this pawn. It threatens to unleash the latent potential of this rook on the king. And our opponent castles because they don't like that discovery. And so I debated, okay, do we take? Do we push? Do we check here? We can't check though right now because the knight is here, but we do want our knight to get into that e7 square. So I do take the knight, and they play f takes. If they play h takes or whatever, it's terrible for them, obviously. And we play rook ad1. One thing that we definitely want to be able to do is we want to be able to get this knight out of there. Our opponent takes the c2 pawn, and we play rook e2, which is apparently the only good move. And our opponent plays queen takes a2, and this is bad for them for several reasons. So we play knight e7 check, which we spent a long time thinking about, and they play king h8, and I play queen h4. Now, it would have been nicer to be able to be on the h3 square. It turns out that it's okay to be on the h4 square, but I lamented not having this square available to my queen later. Nonetheless, the thing that we're threatening is if our opponent plays a nothing move, we can play this with check, and our opponent goes here. And it would have been nice to be on the h3 square because then we can threaten checks along here, for example. The rook has to come up. Things are melting in our opponent's position at that point. Nonetheless, our opponent plays queen f7, which is a fine move, and we play e6, which our rook is defending. So our opponent now has a choice between moving along this file, moving in here, which immediately gets captured by the knight, or moving back to e8. And if you'd like to take a moment, you can figure out which one of those is the correct move. I'll tell you. So our opponent can't go here because we can play bishop g5. Our opponent can't go to f5 because we take it with a knight. And our opponent can't take this bishop because then, let's show you this actually. Our opponent can't take this bishop because then this check comes. The pawn is pinned, so it cannot capture. And then we're taking the queen on the next move, right? And then if rook takes, queen takes, now we have two rooks and a queen versus two pieces and a rook where we're up several exchanges. So our opponent picks queen f6. They should have played queen f8. Then the game continues. In particular, they continue to defend this pawn, which is something that they're worried about. But then we get to play bishop g5, as we had mentioned. So now we're defending the knight with the bishop and with the queen, so they can't take. They can't go back here because of the pawn. They can't go here because knight takes. They can't go here because bishop takes. They can't go here because pawn takes. They can't go to f2 because rook takes. They can't go to f1 because rook takes. They can't go to e5 because rook takes. They can't go to d4 because rook takes. They can't go to c3 because then we play... they can't go to c3 or b2 because then knight takes check here is just devastating. So our opponent picks what they think is the least of the poisons, and they play queen f5. First of all, in this position, we got to this position. I'd calculated. I was like, oh, I'm trapping his queen. Yes, we got him. And then they play their queen there, and I go, man, I know I had something good here. I'm sure there's a move here that's good. I wonder what it is. And it took me like 4 minutes to figure it out. I was like, what is it? And then like right as I was starting to get impatient with myself, I was like, oh yeah, the knight can just take the queen. Doesn't that seem good? So I played knight takes queen. He played g takes f5, and I take the knight that was heretofore undefended down on the second rank. So now actually you'll count 2 rooks versus 2 rooks, a bishop versus a bishop, a queen versus nothing, and then we have 3 pawns and our opponent has 7 pawns. So I have a queen for 4 pawns. That's good for us. So our opponent plays... our opponent resets up the board. Our opponent plays a5 because they're like, okay, well, there's nothing over here for us, so they might as well get some stuff. And we play rook f1. Our opponent plays a4. We play e7, trying to get that rook to move. Our opponent moves in front of the pawn. We take the f5 pawn, and they play a3. Now, I start to worry about it a little bit, so I play rook a2, and our opponent plays bishop c5 to defend here again. Now, it's interesting if our opponent had played something else, let's say, then we can take this, because when they take, we check, check, and mate. So, defending with their bishop was the right move. And I was thinking, okay, well, we need to move our queen back in order to be able to defend here. And I was like, well, and I also, this like rook is a little undefended, and like I should figure out what's going on there. And so I really carelessly play queen f2. And we have a game. Bishop takes, rook takes, and b5. Now, again, a thing that I wish I had seen. I can take this pawn. If rook takes, rook check, rook, mate, right? So we can basically take this a3 pawn for nothing, and then it's 3 pawns. It's 5 pawns versus 3 pawns and a bishop. But we have this pawn in the 7th rank, and both of our rooks are going to be able to come and stop whatever's going on here. And this rook is just perpetually stuck here. However, I didn't see that, so I played rook f3, and my opponent plays b4. And now they have the slight advantage. So this is, we've gone from up a queen to three pawns for a piece, which is not good for us. Play rook af2, which is still bad. They play h6, trying to get our bishop to move. We play rook f8 check. They play king h7. We play rook 2 to f7. They play a2. And I knew they were going to play a2. a2 I don't even think is the best move, but I knew that they were going to play it. And we play bishop f6. So if they play something, this is checkmate, right? Obviously, they don't play that. And they play rook takes f8. Now, the thing that I spent forever trying to figure out here is, first of all, I have a perpetual. Check here, check here, check here, check here, and there's just no way to get out for my opponent, right? So I have that perpetual. I know that I can do that. I know that I can do that in the bag. Now, alternatives are rook takes, pawn push, bishop a1, king h2. I have a bunch of alternatives, but this pawn being so close to queening is causing some problems for me. And there were a bunch of variations I was trying to calculate where I was trying to figure out, okay, rook takes, pawn takes, queen. If they queen, then we can take. I was also trying to figure out, it wasn't clear to me whether or not this was going to be all right. It turns out it totally is, if not only because we can do this, but there was some ghost that I was seeing here. Now, it turns out I did play rook takes f8 because I was like, I think there's a win here, and I calculated it all out, and it seemed fine. But there was some variation here that I was not in love with. I can't remember what it is. I mean, one of the other things that you have to figure out here is promotion here, check here, and here reasonable. And it turns out in this circumstance, we have 2 pawns versus 5 pawns, but we have a rook, so we should, in theory, be able to come get these pawns. So we play. Our opponent's probably going to play something like this. We can go here, and we should be able to scoop these pawns up, but it's unclear whether or not these are runners. And there was something else where we had to like erase our kings across the board, but I think I was just calculating completely incorrectly. Anyways, We played rook takes. They played rook takes. We played take a queen. They took our bishop. We check. They play king h8, and we take their passed pawn. And from this point, it's just a matter of them trying to find moves that are going to be able to get them in the game. And for me, it's just a matter of trying to slowly put myself in a position where I'm not going to stalemate my opponent and checkmate them, which is why I promoted a second queen. So we did end up winning the game, but it went from we are up a queen to actually it's -5 to we have a forced draw, should we take it, to, oh, this is actually an easy win. If we look at the game review hates us. The game review says it's really bad. We played 70.9, they played 60.3, we played 2 great moves, they played 4 great moves. Yeah, not good. But very entertaining. I told you it would be entertaining. Nobody said I was good. Anyways, these are the kinds of games that we enjoy getting. So that was good, and I was really glad to actually be able to get a win in the tournament. Going 2 out of 5 instead of 1 out of 5 is a big difference. And even 1.5 out of 5 versus 2 out of 5 is a big difference, and our opponent's rated like 700. So, yeah, oh gosh. So glad that this ended up working out for us.
All right, and so our final opponent was 778, and we did get a win. So that moves our performance up to 966 and our rating up to 1134. So at least we managed to recoup a few rating points. Let's see what the chart looks like. And we can see here in our rating chart, again, we start high and we dip down. Again, draw, loss, and a win here finally. But because our opponent was so low rated, he's only 778, that actually is bad news for us. And I don't think he even scored any points in this tournament besides a bye. So his rating is actually only going to be worse moving forward. So we think we should be around 1134, and we'll have to see whether or not that reconciles with the actual ratings when the tournament posts. I don't know whether or not any of my opponents had provisional ratings or not, and if they do, then this is going to be inaccurate. So we'll find out.
Oh my goodness, you guys. What a roller coaster. So, I was playing white against Zhang Yi, who I think his friends called Jake after the game. I found out after the fact. He didn't really want to talk. He was having a bad tournament. I play e4. He plays e5. We get our king's gambit. That's right. And then, like, early on, he's playing a line that I'm, like, less familiar with, and I have the choice between taking the pawn on f4, like, winning back my pawn and being even material, or putting my bishop out on c4 and, like, marshalling the attack. And I'm like, I don't really see what's going to stop me from playing bishop c4 later. I might as well get my pawn back, which is the wrong attitude. We're here to fight people. Fighting people is not taking your material back. So I ended up in this, like, really weird position where I kept, like, bleeding pawns over and over again, so he had more of an initiative, and he kept winning material, and I was like, bro, screw material. We just gotta, like, go all in for the attack. And it ended up being, like, a really wild and weird game, which was really interesting. At some point in the middle, I trap his queen, and then I start to consolidate, but he starts pushing a pawn. And then in attempting to defend the pawn, I make a lazy move and hang my own queen, which is insane. And so then I've got to figure out now, like, I'm up a piece, but he's up 3 pawns, and one of his pawns is on the 7th rank, and one of my pawns is on the 7th rank. And so, like, it's a question of, like, who's going to queen first? And so then I put him in check, and then he like sidesteps with his king. And so then I, like, move my rook up, like, getting ready to, like, mate him. And then he, like, plays one of the moves that, like, prevents that. And then I have the opportunity for a perpetual check. I can play rook takes g7, and then rook back to f7, g7, s7, g7, f7, and he's just going to go from one square in check to a different square in check, to a different square in check, to a different square in check. Like, there's nothing he can do. But I see another line, and I don't know, I haven't looked at this with a computer yet, so hopefully the analysis I will have told you this, but I don't know whether or not this other line is sound. And I spend a while calculating, and I'm like, okay, so if I play this, and he plays that, and I play this, then when he goes there, I can take this, and it's fine. And I, like, did a few different calculations, and I spent, a solid 15 minutes on it. By the way, this kid had used like 30 seconds for the entire game. Like, he was basically just playing a blitz game, which was wild. Because I got down to like 40 something minutes on the clock, which for me, that's a ton of thinking. Like, I'm not a super patient guy. I don't know if you can tell by my demeanor. So eventually I'm like, okay, I know I could take a draw, but earlier I was winning, and then I was, like, definitely losing, and I feel like he's responded to this incorrectly. So do I, like, push for the win, or do I, like, just sort of take the draw? And eventually I go, look, most of the easy lines I'm going to win. I don't see any lines where I'm not at least drawing. And if there's a line where my opponent wins and they manage to find it, they deserve to win. I'm not just gonna, it's the same as, like, taking a draw. I don't know that I'm lost. So I might as well go for the win. And I play a move that's not perpetual check, and my opponent responds with one of the things I understood, and then they play a response that they knew, and then I knew, and back and forth, and we end up slowly getting the win very methodically. Our opponent plays all the way to checkmate very graciously. They were very kind. They were not very happy. Their friends immediately came over and they were like, you were winning. Like, you played the wrong thing. Because when I was close to the point where I was going to mate them, if they moved their rook one square instead of a different square, it would have been fine. But you guys, it was so hard. It was so easy. I trapped his queen. First of all, when I trapped his queen, I didn't see that I was like, oh yes, this will trap his queen. I played a move. He moved his queen to one of the squares where I can take it. And then I sat there for like 5 minutes being like, I wonder what I'm going to do now. This seems to continue to defend. And then like right before I made my move, I was like, oh yeah, that's a free queen. Holy shit. Sorry. Hopefully, oh man. Jeez, what a wild game. So we end 2 for 5, which is not terrible, just below average, well out of the prizes. We're going to lose a ton of rating points, but at least we salvaged our last game, and we know what we need to come away with this from. We need moves as black that continue to take the initiative, and we probably need those for the Scandinavian and against the Sicilian as well. I mean, we have our Alpine Sicilian, and we're a little comfortable with that, but we'd like to have some aggressive lines, because the more aggressive lines that we know, the more likely it is that our opponent has to play into some trap that we understand and they don't. And we'd like them to happen early in the game as well. That's why the King's Gambit is nice, is e4, e5. Great! We can play the Gambit now! Geez. Gosh, I am hyped. This has been a fun tournament. Very hard, but a good use of a long weekend. I have tomorrow off for Juneteenth. Yay, equal rights. Yeah, I think that's all I've got for you guys. That was just a wild... I'm sure you guys have seen that the video is super duper long. And the reason is, the game was so wild. I'm glad I have you guys to come and like vlog too, because I'm so hyped, and there's no, I can go home and talk to my roommates or whatever, but like they don't understand the chess, so they won't care as much. But you guys, you're here for it. I mean, I love my roommates, don't get me wrong, blah blah blah. Let me caveat that appropriately. My roommates are great and they will listen to me be excited, but I'm excited to be able to share the game with some people that like are into the same stuff and are really looking forward. Anyways, I've been blabbing for far too long. I'll talk to you guys then.